Good afternoon, everyone. Rob Fletcher, co-founder at DevZero. Previous to that, I was at Facebook for a little over a year, leading a large part of product security. Previous to that, I was at Uber doing a lot of product security. I just mentioned that because it's obviously relevant to the vulnerability management things we're going to run through. I only have about 11 minutes, so I'm going to move pretty quickly. But what I'm really hoping is to just kind of cover overall methodology, and then I've provided a bunch of various open source tools that can be really helpful in getting started in this stuff. So we'll start with the basic, what is vulnerability management? I'm not going to read that entire sentence to you, but it's essentially that second stanza, right? Like, how do we find, fix, and prevent vulnerabilities? They typically land in two buckets, first-party and third-party vulnerabilities. We could have a philosophical discussion around whether or not misconfigurations and weaknesses are vulnerabilities, but that's a discussion over coffee. So if we kind of follow the find, fix, prevent, especially as it relates to kind of cloud environments and cloud development environments, in find, we really want to make sure we essentially have an inventory of all of our machines and an inventory of all the software running on those machines. Typically called asset tracking and SBOMs, software bill of materials. And then you move into fix. How do you prioritize and remediate based on risk, which is really important because we've all seen various static analysis tools give us thousands of vulnerabilities, of which maybe 1% are valid. And I have personal experience and know that if you go to a developer and tell them to fix something and it isn't actually a vulnerability, it becomes a hard conversation. And then finally, prevent. There's some things we can do around, and I almost put this in, I might have actually put, no, I didn't. I almost put in parentheses mitigate as well, because you want to be able to prevent by finding things before they actually land in production, for example. But you also want to have some knobs to be able to turn stuff off really quickly if there's any exposure or anything like that. Well, it's not traditionally preventing vulnerabilities, it is preventing kind of the risk from the exposure of those vulnerabilities. So the key open source tools, I've got their graphics on the next ones and stuff, but down here on the bottom, if you're interested, probably take a picture of that. That'll be what the tools I'm recommending through the rest of the slides. So on the find side, asset tracking, kind of visibility of cloud resources. You don't want any shadow environments or dev environments or anything like that. This can be surprisingly difficult. So we want to make sure that we have a complete inventory of all of the machines, production, development, testing, and things like that. That kind of gives you a map of the world that you need to care about. Again, surprisingly difficult. A lot of headway in the last 5 years, I would say, on that, especially with cloud being so prominent. And cloud query is pretty good. You know, every tool has its limitations, but that's an open source tool that's pretty good for just keeping an inventory of all the machines. And then, as I mentioned, software bill of materials, vulnerability in a given package, whether it's at the host level or application level. You need to know what you're running, you need to know what version you're on, and you need to be able to say, hey, are we affected by this? Which machines are affected? So that you can take that full map and then start whittling it down to the areas that you really need to focus on. Sift and Gripe actually work really harmoniously together, so highly recommend them. They have really cool logos too, not that that matters, but and then this is the bucket that's honestly a bit of a pain, and there's not a lot of great automation right now. But when thinking about what do we fix now and how much does it matter, the kind of traditional way to think about it is impact and likelihood. Like, there's some terribly severe vulnerabilities that have almost zero likelihood of ever being exploited, and that shouldn't take priority over a medium that has a very high likelihood of exploitation, because the name of the game here is mitigating risk, right? Not just fixing things to fix them. So making sure to think deeply about where does the risk live and using that to drive prioritization is really, really important. And again, I couldn't find any really great tools in the last 5 years. If you know any, please tell me. And then prevent, in the bucket of prevent, again, you want to be able to have various knobs to turn things off. That's more in the mitigate bucket than prevent. Chekhov is reasonably good open source kind of IAC analysis to detect vulnerabilities before they actually make it into production or deployed or anything like that. So that's one good tool that we use. It's not everything you can do, obviously, no single tool is, but that goes a long way as well. So, little short. And then finally, kind of like the title of the talk, right? Like cloud development environments, why do those matter? How do they help? And I probably should have put the middle bullet at the top, but 60% of security breaches originate from insecure development environments. We all know enough math to know 60% is a majority. So a majority of breaches are because development environments are insecure. And one of the really great things about cloud development environments is it kind of helps centralize all of what we just talked about. So you understand, you can track and understand inventory, you can scan and patch at scale, you can identify the vulnerable machines and just turn them off. And this is pretty powerful when it comes to mitigating a lot of risk and exposure and things like that. So it can kind of be a central developer platform where you have this software bill of materials, you have the inventory, you have the knobs to mitigate any risk, and it's pretty great. It also, unrelated to security, I'm sure we've all struggled with getting a development environment set up in 2 weeks, right? That's kind of a pain. It takes a lot of that away too, because you kind of have golden path defined, click a button, get an environment, which has other non-security benefits. And then, yeah, I think I've covered everything else in that. I managed to make that through pretty quickly with 3 minutes to spare. But let's see, yeah. So again, I would just, this is kind of the guts, I think, of what really make a good foundational vulnerability management for cloud development environments, at least from the open source angle. So yeah, happy to take any questions. I would be remiss if I didn't plug that I'm co-founder at DevZero. We have a booth out there. We do CDs. Happy to talk to you about it, but didn't want to make the talk about that. So any questions, anything people want to chat about? I think that was 7 seconds. That's the scientific how long you're supposed to wait. So thank you guys for your time.